Hello, I'm Julie Swenson, Managing Director of Forward Theater Company in Madison, Wisconsin.
And I'm Mike Fisher, a Milwaukee-based theater writer and dramaturg.
And I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray, founder and artistic director of Forward Theater Company. And this is Theater Forward, a monthly conversation about theater from a local, regional, and national perspective. From Madison to Manhattan, we're excited to share insights into our own company while exploring issues surrounding theater in the Midwest and around the country. Welcome to episode 114 of Theater Forward.
Great to be here.
So in this episode, we are, as we annually do, we're going to chat about the recently released lists from American Theater Magazine, the top 10 most produced plays and top 20 most produced playwrights of the current season. And I'm going to kick us off by talking about who's on that top 10 plays list. And we will drop links to these lists in our show notes for those who want to follow along. So the top 10, and actually it's 11 because of a tie, most produced plays of the 24 to 25 season in America, drumroll, begins with What the Constitution Means to Me. Then we go to Fat Ham, King James, Primary Trust, the musical Jersey Boys, another musical Waitress, POTUS, or Behind Every Great Dumbass, or Seven Women Trying to Keep Him Alive. Have to read the subtitle of that one. Dial M for Murder, The Heart Sellers, A Case for the Existence of God, and The Play That Goes Wrong. And I love that the list ends with that title. So let's just start with kind of reacting to that list. Are there things that really expected to see there or really surprised you? Julie, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend Forward Theater for contributing to this list, because 3 of those plays on the list we have either done or will do this season. So yay us. The one that really strikes me the most, and it comes from the world that we found ourselves after the pandemic, and we all felt like we need to do substantive plays, and we need to talk about social justice, and people need to be thinking about what we've just come out of. And what we've realized is, yes, and we also need to be entertained, and so there needs to be a balance of that. And what thrills me to no end is to see Dial M for Murder, the adaptation by Jeffrey Hatcher. And as we know, I don't know that there's great social commentary in Dial M for Murder. It's fun. It's a great little mystery. It's cheeky. It's entertaining. And I I love that there are then other plays that are of more substance, maybe we can say, but this balance that is reflected in what the theaters in America are doing right now gives me great hope in our industry.
Well, to take the glass half empty approach, for me, not
really
only was
I handed that right to you, Mike.
you sure did, because not only did I find this adaptation incredibly unsuccessful in attempting to check all the politically correct boxes while missing the thrust and heart of the classic original, but I think this list, and boy, we're going to see it even more with the playwright list, is just steeped in nostalgia and escapism. In a moment where we need to see more, to my mind, issue plays confronting the dire state of the world that we're in. And what we're seeing in American theater is, with some exceptions on this list, no doubt, including exceptions being produced by Forward, Constitution, and Case for the Existence of God being 2 of them, we see a retreat from challenging audiences with work that's making them think, a fear, given the precarious state of American theater, that producing more adventuresome work, and God forbid new work, of which you see very little on this list, would be too much for American audiences to handle. So now let me end my comment on a positive note, because this is all attention paid to Jen Gray, the prophet. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and I can't remember, a long time ago now, when we were first looking as a company at Case for the Existence of God, Jen predicted, and I remember this, we were sitting around a picnic table in Madison, Wisconsin in August with our entire advisory company. She said, this play, The Case for the Existence of God, which she was all in on and fighting for, she said, this is absolutely going to be on the list of the top 10 plays. I just know it. I feel it in my bones. And this is when there had been very little with it that had been done. And she was wrong, but that's only because Jen, being the prophet that she is, was a year early. It made it onto this year's list, not last year's list, but it just goes to show that we have an artistic director with her finger on the pulse.
Mike, that's very kind. It was probably as much hope as prophecy on my part, but I love the yin and yang that the two of you.
Well, as they say in King James, Mike, we're going to agree to disagree.
Yeah,
and you yell, no, you're wrong.
But what I would point out, because I actually was looking at this list and kind of getting my head wrapped around it, and did a little math on it. And so 6 of the 11 plays are super, super recent plays. 6 of the 11, and all really substantive. So in that 6, I'm counting Fat Ham, King James, Primary Trust, POTUS, Heart Sellers, Case for the Existence of God. I wasn't even including Constitution among those because that one is like, 5 years old now, 6 years old now. If you include that, then you've got 7 out of the 11 are much more recent and pretty substantive, alongside some musicals and some comedies. Your Plays Go Wrong, your Dials M for Murder, and so I actually think, given the moment that we're in, and the worry about are we pushing too hard towards nostalgia, or are we pushing too hard towards sort of forcing things on an audience they're not kind of in the mood for. I like this balance. I think it. If this was a season, these 11 plays, I don't think there's any company in the country that's doing these 11 plays and musicals. But if it were, I would be like, oh, that's a pretty well-balanced season. It's got a nice mix of things. I do wish that there were more women and people of color on this list. I think that's actually gone down a little bit. There's 4 women, 4 folks of color amongst these playwrights in terms of who's writing these pieces. I wish that ratio was a little more representative. And I have not gone back to look at that, but I think it was a bit better the last few seasons. Only 2 of the 11 are musicals. The other 9 are plays. So I sort of dig that. And despite, some real economic concerns that are lingering in our field. I mean, as we're recording this, Cal Shakes just announced last night that they are closing, which is a tragedy. They're a 50-year-old company. So despite those economic concerns, only 4 of these 11 shows are super small cast. And I recognize the irony of saying that in a season where Forward is doing 3 small cast shows, albeit not for budgetary reasons. I had a great conversation with a supporter a couple days ago where I was like, the fact that the cast is smaller doesn't mean the show is cheaper if you have to hire more backstage people to accomplish something, right? But small cast shows can be indicative of concerns. And so the fact that only 4 of these 11 are really sort of tiny cast makes me happy. And I also just want to shout out how thrilled and proud and unsurprised I am to see Lloyd Suh's The Heart Sellers on this list, a show that debuted in 2023 at Milwaukee Repertory Theater as part of World Premiere Wisconsin. We've talked about it a ton. I adore that play. And I'm thrilled to see it really getting done all over.
Well, and I think that it's interesting to me that I guess the 4 plays on this list that are most issue driven and most heartfelt are the smallest. It's The Heart Sellers, Case for the Existence of God, King James, and Constitution, all of them questing in some way to start a conversation about what really matters in American life. And this gets to another issue, which will unfold more when we get to the list of playwrights. Because, Jen, this list is tilted. I mean, you've got people like Lauren Gunderson and Kate Hamill and Ken Ludwig, who you're going to talk about in a minute, who are all doing, in terms of the plays that are being done, they're mostly fluffy. And they're just split between so many of their different plays that they don't land with a particular play on this list. So I do think the fluff problem is real. And I think that talking about real issues, which you're right, Forward has done two of the plays I've mentioned, and Heart Sellers was just done in Milwaukee, so it wouldn't make sense for us to do that right now, are tiny. And the idea of large issue-driven plays, the plays of an O'Neill and a Williams and a Miller, even Wilson, although he is at least on the Playwrights list, we're not seeing those plays get done.
Because
When it's a big
playwrights,
play, it's a comedy, or it's not being done at all.
but new playwrights know that the very first thing producers do is look at the cast list, and if it's
I
too
know.
big, they don't even read the play.
I
We
know.
know this. So
Well,
I say good for them for figuring out what can actually be produced.
but then you have plays in, Jez Butterworth, the latest example with Hills of California. You have larger plays in New York that are doing just fine, that are issue driven plays. Why is The Ferryman, which is a fantastic play, one of the best plays of the 21st century, to stick with Butterworth? Why are we not seeing productions of that anywhere? Yeah, it's because it's big. But when we want to do a big play, we have no problem producing the 4,000th production of the play that goes wrong. Shoot me now. So it's like, why aren't we doing big plays that are issue plays? And I think it's because companies are afraid of them.
I mean, I have to say I'm with Julie. It's a budget thing more than anything. I don't think it's a fear thing. I think it's a budget thing. And the Ferryman has livestock on stage, for crying out loud.
Right.
I'm like, I think that's a playwright going, I don't want anybody except for Broadway and the West End to produce
Right.
my play.
Or
That
try
feels
this,
very,
I dare you.
yeah. I mean, I see, and I don't think of this as a negative so much as a pragmatic thing. To Julie's point, playwrights, especially playwrights who are writing issue-driven, impactful social plays, want them to be produced so the maximum number of people can see them and be impacted by them. If it's cost prohibitive to produce it, it won't get produced. And I don't think that the ideas are smaller in something that, Rajiv Joseph is writing, or something that Ebony Booth is writing, or that Lloyd Suh is writing, or that Sam Hunter is writing. I don't think the ideas are smaller, or that the ability for impact is smaller than what, a Miller was writing, or a Tennessee Williams. And I think yes, Williams got produced all over, Miller got produced all over in the 50s when there was just a different economy for theaters around the country. But I don't think that the size of the cast has to reflect the size of the ideas or the impact. And again, this is the pragmatic me, the pragmatic voter, the pragmatic producer who says, yeah, put your ideas at a scale where the maximum number of people are going to be able to engage with them. Yes, I'm dying to see The Hills of California, but we'll never produce it. It's gigantic.
No, of course not. and I get that. Look, I mean, we're in a different position. To be fair, there's a difference between, and I'll take places from different cities. There's a difference between a Steppenwolf and a Goodman, or a Milwaukee Rep in Wisconsin, and what their budgets, or even American Players Theater, and what their budgets allow them to do. Yeah. Versus what a company of the size of Forward can do. I mean, right. So I think different budget issues for different theaters. But for a largish theater with a big budget, which will produce big plays, but they're only producing comedies by and large when they produce big plays. That's my issue. I understand that in a smaller company you can do less. And by the way, I guess I do believe that in 99 out of 100 cases, and we'll leave Forward's plays out of this for lots of reasons, I do think that you end up doing less, no matter how good the playwright is, when you've only got 2 or 3 people on stage. I mean, I think Heart Sellers is a fantastic play. I do. I really do. But when you've only got 2 people going back and forth through the whole thing, you can do wonderful things and it can be very moving. It doesn't deal with immigrant issues in the way that a larger play would be able to do, because you can only show so many shades of life when you've only got 2 characters to represent them. That's not anything against the playwright or the play. That's just the reality of what only 2 characters on stage allows, for me.
Ooh, like I just love how this conversation is going because it's sucking me into different thoughts than I was necessarily coming into a conversation about these lists with. But yeah, I mean, I think this is just another difference of opinion. And my God, we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah,
art,
yeah.
so it's all opinion.
Right.
But I always think that so let's take an immigration story, and trying to create empathy for audience members learning about different experiences. The deep dive that you get in a two-hander where it's really character driven and you really get to believe these three-dimensional characters and feel like you're understanding a deeper picture of their lives, I think has the potential to be more impactful on an issue than a big cast play where you get a little picture of a lot of different perspectives on an issue, but because it's this big cast play, you're not going as deep. And so you might get a broader and shallower understanding of an issue, which has its value, a breadth, because no two people can stand in for an entire demographic.
Right.
Nor can 15 people stand in for a
Right,
demographic.
right.
But there is value in breadth of an issue. But I also think there's value in depth. And I think a smaller cast play can go deeper in that empathy building part of it, where you really believe that these are three-dimensional characters and humans you might run into on the street. And I get really inspired by that opportunity to impact people's thinking in that sort of gut level emotional way that may then filter into how they move through the world, differently than in the intellectual way that the big cast plays, I do think, engage much better on that intellectual level. Because you can get more arguments, you can get more perspectives, you can get more facts, all of that you can get in better, I think, in a large cast play. But the deep core human emotion, I think, comes through sometimes deeper with a small play. Anyway, it's a difference.
Well said, Jen. I mean, that's as eloquent and really persuasive argument as I think one can make. For that, I'm still going to always be haunted more by A View from the Bridge, or even a smallish but larger play like Ironbound on immigration issues than I am by Heart Sellers. But that's just me. You're right. It's a difference. It's subjective.
It's all good. Because you brought it up, let me just run real quick through the list of our top 20, or again, it's 25 because of different ties, playwrights of the season, just so we've kind of got that in our heads as we continue this conversation. So at the top with 18 productions, we have Kate Hamill and Rajiv Joseph. Then at the next level of 16 productions, Jeffrey Hatcher, James Iams, and Heidi Schreck. At 13, we've got Ebony Booth, Rick Elise, Lauren Gunderson, Frederick Knott, August Wilson. Lloyd Suh is holding the 12 production slot by himself. At 11, we have a whole bunch: Marshall Brickman, Selena Fillinger, Samuel D. Hunter, Ken Ludwig, Jesse Nelson. At 9, we've got the team of Henry Lewis, Jonathan Sayer, and Henry Shields. They're Jersey boys. And Thomas Meehan and the fabulous Lynn Nottage. And then at 8, we've got Howard Ashman, Jocelyn Bio, Patrick Barlow, and Stephen Dietz. And some of those numbers include co-writing as well. And again, that list is linked in our show notes, so you can get the details. But yeah, out of that list of 25, 8 of them are women. 7 are writers of color. Those numbers seem a little low to me compared to last few seasons. Not terrible. We've certainly been in worse places as a field, but I wish it was a little better.
Well, can I say too, for people that are not aware, this is the TCG list. And this is the list for the members of TCG. Not every company in the country is a member. And so it's a little bit skewed. I think they do a nice job of it's a good reflection of the United States, but it isn't in total. No one has looked at every theater company in America and is compiling this list.
And even all the professional theaters are not.
It's all professional theaters. And so a little bit skewed on this list, just to be aware of.
Right. Because like we know, we've talked about this before, like our colleagues at Milwaukee Rep are not TCG members anymore, and they do a whole bunch of shows, and the shows they're doing are not counted in
Right. Right.
this list. So yes, a very good point. And I do want to just contextualize. This gets back to my comments earlier about the fact that we are still in the rough waters that started. Well, they kind of predated the pandemic, but that were really the waters were made choppier by the pandemic financially with companies. So just to quote from the editor of American Theater magazine, the number of full productions at TCG member theaters for this 24-25 season is 1,281. That's down from last season, which was 1,560. And that's significantly below pre-pandemic levels. The 1920 listings had 2,229. So it's a pretty massive contraction. And they actually point out that they counted an additional 176 productions that they, counted up at commercial and non-TCG member theaters. They're looking just at professional companies, but there are another, as to your point, Julie, another 176 that they identified that aren't included in the list, but that they counted to get a sense. But even if you put that number in there, we're still below last season and way below pre-pandemic. So those are some sobering numbers. The number of theaters that used to do 7 shows and now are doing 6 or 5. They used to do 5 and are doing 4. They used to do 4 and are doing 3. And of course, the companies that are not producing anymore. It's still rough out there for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Something that I find optimistic in these listens, I think, you heard so far in this conversation. I love the fact that you're seeing prominent placement on 2 lists for James Imes and on one of them for Jocelyn Bio, who I think are the kinds of playwrights who, both writers of color, both producing plays that I think do take on difficult, serious issues, but also, to Julie's point, have that sweet spot in them. I mean, Fat Ham is an awesome redo of Hamlet. It's also filled with humor and joy.
Yes.
And, it's not like, everybody sprawled all over the stage, Titus Andronicus style at the end. Like there's actually a sort of happy ending. And it's cathartic to have those kinds of engagements with very serious social issues. Bio is fantastic at taking on beauty standards in America, and particularly as they affect women of color. And not just in America, I should say. In Nigeria as well. But she's really good. They're both really good at sort of taking on tough stuff and doing it in a way that injects humor in it. And that is obviously, ideally, if you can capture both sides of that divide. That's why I mentioned Ironbound earlier, the Martina Mayok play, which is a really tough, difficult, dark play about the immigration experience in America, but also has real humor baked into it. And we just need more. We need more plays that manage to do both of those things really well.
Amen. You and I are in total agreement on that.
Yay!
Those are my favorite plays: substance and entertainment wedded together.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We've got, again, our great colleague, good friend, Lauren Gunderson, who just keeps putting out plays that are being produced. And she's on this list, but it's because of her ability to keep writing plays. I mean, I'm looking 13 productions, 4 co-writes. It doesn't say specifically what those 13 productions are, but those are that represents several of her plays.
Yes.
And that's true of a couple of these most produced playwrights are getting in there because it's not just one play, it's multiple. Kate Hamill has her Jane Austen series, Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. I'm sure account for a lot of those 18 productions.
And her new play about Artemisia Gentileschi, speaking of Lauren Gunderson. So we've got 2 different Artemisia plays that are represented by 2 of these playwrights on this list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, little
She's
zeitgeist.
she's truly a merchant in ivory of American theater. You know, I mean, it's like because you're also getting Thackeray and you're getting Dracula and you're getting whatever. And I find this. I mean, you're never going to have me argue against producing adaptations of 19th century novels. You know, but I do find it interesting that both with her and with Lauren. I'm guessing with the Gunderson, since I'm about to enter double digits this Christmas season of seeing the Jane Austen trilogy that she has co-written, a lot of it is again, and this is both nostalgia and a hunger for among audiences and theater producers for the familiar. So when you see that a Kate Hamill production of some 19th century novel is on the docket, audience goers feel comfort with that. It's taking nothing away from her adaptations. I think some of them are marvelous, but there is also something about that which distresses me, even though they're very good plays and I respect them very much, because it again, and you're seeing this everywhere. This is also on Broadway, right? You're seeing a recourse to older things being redone rather than pushing the envelope with new work. Which one name I wish was on this list and isn't. Speaking of new work, another playwright of color. To me, hands down, no argument. Best playwright writing in America today is Brandon Jacob Jenkins.
Mm.
Thinking the hardest and the smartest about all these kinds of things, manages to combine humor and deep issues. But again, most of the casts are really big, and so his plays aren't getting done.
First of all, just I mean, co-sign being in the Brandon Jacobs Jenkins fan club for
Yep.
sure.
Sign me up too.
But I'm also, the thinking about the Kate Hamill Jane Austen adaptations and the Lauren Gunderson, Margaret Melton Jane Austen adaptations, and how, I do think those account for a large portion of why those two playwrights are on that most produced list. And it's got me thinking about the fact that I think the surge in popularity of those adaptations in the last few years kind of mimics the surge of the romance industry in publishing, and how there's just been this real investment and embrace of this kind of story, whether it's in a book or in a film, TV show, or on stage, and the things that you can explore within that romance genre, be it issues of gender, race, class, empowerment, all of that. As someone who loves that genre alongside many others, it's really just occurring to me in this conversation how that surge of productions, and the reason that they keep writing more of them, and the companies like Northlights produce them all near us outside of Chicago, the Gunderson ones. Theaters are, if they produce one and then they come back for more because their audiences just love them. They sell really well. So I think there's this is not negating the issue about preferring the familiar over something that's more provocative or fresh or new, Mike. But I do think it's interesting that this style of storytelling, this genre, is really hitting home with folks, with the folks who are consuming the art right now. And I think there's something in that.
That's totally fair. And you look at, I mean, Jane Austen's not just one of our best 19th century novelists; she's one of our best novelists, period. And you think of the dilemmas in different shades that of a Lizzie or of an Emma, or of Anne Elliot. Like those struggles are struggles that people can relate to today. And you don't need to go full on Bridgerton, even though Bridgerton's awesome, to understand, like Kate Hamill does, the appeal of that. And I forgot to mention earlier her Little Women adaptation, which again, she's focusing in her adaptations, the Vanity Fair, focusing on Becky Sharp. So you're getting a gallery of women struggling in a world they never made in the 19th century against very difficult circumstances. Of course, that's going to resonate. And again, I love the adaptations. I don't want to undersell why they're valuable, because they are.
Yeah. Any sort of final thoughts? That we've managed to find so much to say.
Well, the thing is, we're talking about plays. This could go on. I mean, we probably will say goodbye and continue this conversation, which is what we tend to do. So, yeah, it could go on for quite a while. I love these lists. I love the way, um, I love what's on it. I love, just as you said, Mike, what's not on it, and getting us thinking of what the theater what the theater ecosystem looks like in the United States. And that's what this list shows. And I find, for good and bad, some great things to talk about.
Yep.
Well, that was a pretty awesome summary right there, Julie, of what this list accomplished and why we like talking about it. So I think we should say that that is all for this episode of Theater Forward. It's a conversation about theater in Wisconsin, the Midwest, and America. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray.
And I'm Julie Swenson.
And I'm Mike Fisher, still awaiting American Players Theater's production of The Ferryman. Brenda, this one goes to you. Our podcast is produced by the amazing Scott Hayden, courtesy of whom you can follow us or share your thoughts on Facebook. You'll find us at Theater Forward, and theater, as always, spelled with an E-R.
And if you enjoy this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
We are so grateful to have you listening, and we will be back soon for another Theater Forward conversation.